So there's this fascinating new trend with new humans of outsourcing our knowledge. And I think it's one of the biggest problems out there, especially when it pertains to health and fitness, which is my specialty. So, what do I mean by this? I'll tell you a personal story. When I went to school for health promotion and wellness, which was a fine major, actually, it was, I think, a lot better and more open minded than a lot of majors out there in terms of since it was a smaller school. Everything wasn't as controlled. We had a lot of small classes that were more discussions. And but that being said, I still had to learn from textbooks, and I did learn a lot, but learned from textbooks and had to learn a lot of like government guidelines, especially with in terms of nutrition. With fitness, you're kind of like open to do whatever you want because that's not very like controlled, if that makes sense. I mean, there's no like there's not a lot of censorship when it comes to fitness. I mean, now that I think about that, with nutrition there certainly is because there's a lot of money involved with that industry. But I digress. I graduated and I was one of those people that like they say like 60% of people don't read another book once they get out of school. And I think that's on purpose with our education system because it's our education system is designed, especially in like younger years, elementary, middle school, high school. It's designed to make learning something that you really don't want to do, that you despise almost. The books could not be more boring. I think you guys would agree with that. Every once in a while, maybe depending on what you're into, in like an English class or something, you might get to read like To Kill a Mockingbird, which is kind of a boring book on its own, but at least you get to read something interesting. That's not a textbook. But most of what we learn in school comes from these disgustingly boring textbooks, convoluted. I don't want to go down that hole too much. That's not the point of this video, but what I was going to say is going back to what I was saying after I graduated from college, I would go out and read all these different nutrition books. I would spend a couple hours a day, on average, going to Barnes and Noble on my lunch break because I was a personal trainer, so lunchtime is a dead time oftentimes. You don't have any clients. I didn't have anything to do for a few hours. I'd bike down the street, grab a coffee, and then I would just start reading different nutrition books. And not boring ones, but like all types of health books you could imagine. I would even get into nothing was off the table for me. Never has been. I've always been very open-minded like that. But like, even like vibrational medicines, frequencies-based stuff, Eastern philosophies, stuff like that. Anything I get my hands on, just, to pass the time, but also you'd always absorb a little bit out of that. And I think I amassed quite a bit of knowledge over time because I was always expanding out. I would learn and then I would expand out. Now we're in this society today, you fast forward to today, where the term do your own research has become somehow derogatory from like the establishment, right? Established universities, institutions, the government, etc. They don't want you to do your own research. They want you to listen to the dogma, the programming, if you will. And so people have outsourced their knowledge to experts. Now, part of it is because we live in what was once a high trust society, where I think there was a time long, long ago where this was a high trust society where you could go to teachers and you could go to many experts. Now I'm talking about probably like a little over 100 years ago. So I'm taking a stab at that. That was before a lot of our institutions were hijacked. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but I will give you a little rundown of like, that's when like Rockefeller, the Rockefeller Institute and Foundation, etc., hijacked the medical system through the Flexner Report, and that's where medical education came from. And the whole medical system turned into a drug-based, surgery-based cacophony of a mess, which is what we have today. But also other institutions as well, just education institutions used to be a lot more open-minded. Used to teach a lot more like, I'd say like classical things, if you will. But anyway, all I'm saying here is if you outsource your knowledge, you do so at your own peril, because there are times where you have to do it. I understand, and a lot of people don't have a lot of time to do this kind of research like I did. If you're 22 years old and you already have like 2 kids and a full-time job, I get it. Although I think that's an excuse too. You can always scrape an hour a day or so in order to do that, whatever that research may be. But when you outsource your knowledge, you are at the mercy of whatever institution you may be, looking towards. Now, I will stick on this topic, health and nutrition. So I've been railing, right, for at least 15 years, and I knew this 20 years ago when I was in school, about how bad the government guidelines, the food pyramid was, where you're supposed to eat 50% whole grains, and then fats were on top. Fats and oils were on the top, like you're not supposed to have any fat. And now look at what just recently happened, right? They literally flipped the whole thing on its head, which is it's a good thing they did that. But still, imagine how many, like a whole generation of people were listening to those guidelines and getting obese and sick because of them. And it's because they outsourced their knowledge. See, I didn't. I learned those guidelines when I was in school. But doing my own research, I found, I was like, no, you know what? It turns out fats aren't that bad, depending on the kind of fat. And you shouldn't be eating all these grains. That's how they fatten cattle. It's almost like they're fattening us like cattle. And so, I started finding all these different nutritional strategies. And I noticed that none of this was being told to the public. This is part of the reason I became so skeptical of the government, I guess, if you want to put it softly. But is like from doing my own research. That's what this all comes down to. And a lot of people will, and so, but going back to like how it's become a derogatory term, they're like, oh, you did your own research, huh? Oh, okay. They're implying you're too stupid to do it. That's what I've told people. I'm like, well, they'll say like something about how I can't, for instance, there was an argument I was on online with, and I mean, I wouldn't even call it an argument. This girl, nut job on Facebook, and she's telling me about how I'm not able to correctly read the studies for like the nutritional studies that I was talking about. And I mean, I'll admit it, I lost it, and I was just like, who the F are you to tell me that I can't read and interpret the studies? Like, are you too stupid to read and interpret these studies? Because I'll tell you what, when I went to school, that's a lot of what we did in our science classes was read and interpret studies. And most people that went to college, which is a lot of people, it's not that hard to read a paper and read some numbers and read the conclusion that's usually written on the bottom of it. It's not rocket science, statistics. It's not that hard, but it's become a derogatory term. And so people get pigeonholed, and a lot of times you will find yourself getting very bad information. And I think it's not just health and nutrition where this is the case. This is like your life in general. This could be financial advice. I mean, this could be anything. It could be relationship advice. I mean, so much of what people are getting their information from now, still, even if it's online, it's mainstream sources. We think that there's so many options, but most people are still just going from the same big companies, whether it's New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, Vox News, The Intercept, The Atlantic. They're all they're all the same leaning, propaganda, I guess is the word. And there's the same on kind of the right leaning as well. But there's also just tons and tons of this is the age where ignorance is not an excuse. This is how I'll end this video. Ignorance is not an excuse these days, because there was a time, hundreds of years ago, I'd say, where you didn't have access to anything. If you could have been a peasant who could barely read, who didn't even have access to a person around you that even cared to even maybe teach you how to read or write. Much less now you come into our time and there's not to mention just books in libraries. You have a car, usually. This doesn't pertain to everyone, but I think you know where I'm getting with this. You got libraries down the street. You got bookstores down the street. I've got a Goodwill down the street that sells hardcovers for $1.99, soft covers for 99 cents. You could buy 10 soft covers. And it doesn't even just have to be fiction. It could be financial advice. It could be all types of stuff for $10. And then, of course, we have the internet. So there is no excuse. And don't let people tell you that it's insulting to me. I take it as a personal insult a lot of times. Don't let people tell you that you're too stupid to go get your own information. Now, it is up to you to ascertain whether it is quote unquote legitimate information or not. But that's up to interpretation from each person in general. That's how people come up with their worldview. But I don't know, guys. That just seems this popped into my head earlier today. And just don't outsource your knowledge. You can go do it yourself, and you'll be amazed at how different. And don't be amazed also when you find yourself quite a bit ostracized from society. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for today. I will see you in the next video.